Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Today is, what is today? Sunday,
21st.
December 21st, 2025. Let's begin by setting our intention, making aspiration by saying the four immeasurables prayer. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings not be separated from the happiness that has never known suffering. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment, anger, and aversion. So I'm going to read something from the 16th Karmapa, who was an amazing Buddhist teacher. There's a documentary that's really fascinating about the 16th Karmapa that you should definitely see. Sorry, let me pull this up. But he was one of the great of our time, great teachers of our time. Here it is. Okay. He's talking about bodhicitta, which how would you define that? How does bodhicitta? How do you define that word in Sanskrit
Bodhicitta
directly?
is mind of compassion that
compassion.
seeks the benefit of others.
The skillful means of bodhicitta allow you to be effective in helping others. Bodhisattva activities are divided into four kinds: generosity, pleasant speech, beneficial conduct, and consistency of word and deed. In practicing generosity, a bodhisattva may see someone who is poor. Spontaneously, they would give food, clothing, or whatever may be needed. Bodhisattvas also know that people will not listen well to words spoken in anger. They are sensitive to each person's situation. And understanding this, they speak without abruptness, smoothly and calmly, so that the other person feels comfortable. Bodhisattva conduct allows a bodhisattva to adapt the Dharma to many different situations. If you consider Eastern and Western religions, you can see that the faith in religion can be the same, even though religions themselves are different. If you consider philosophy, however, you will see that there is a difference. In Western countries, therefore, teachers must speak according to Western thought patterns so that the seed of Dharma can fully enter into the experience of Western people. This is the way in which the lamas speak. And that's from a public talk the 16th Karmapa gave at the University of Colorado Boulder in 1980. Victoria is going to speak for a while, then we're going to sit and then we'll do some questions if you have any. There's a Q&A button on the Zoom toolbar. You can ask questions.
Why do we love praise so much? And why do we respond to blame in such a negative way? These are mere sounds. The same person can praise us, the same person can blame us, but our experience is so vastly different. And I would venture to say that these two experiences of sound depend on self-clinging. But just for a minute, please think about how the same noise, the same voice, the same, same sensory experience can affect us so differently. And, let's think about a hypothetical situation for a moment to check really how experience arises. We walk into the room and our partner gives us a certain kind of look, does not look at us directly with the love we anticipate, with the tenderness that we depend on so much, everything that we want. He doesn't look at us with that particular look. Rather, he looks at us with some kind of a distracted look, as if, They're looking through us, not noticing us. We start to unravel right away in that experience. We spin out into concepts. He doesn't like me. He doesn't love me. I am nothing. I'm not attractive. He hates me. He has someone else. He cheated on me. He's awful. And it escalates and escalates and escalates, all based on this one look that the person from whom, and we can see very clearly how much expectation we have every moment of our existence. If the person for a moment did not look at us the way we anticipate and we desire, we spin out through our concepts into something like monstrous. We go from he hates me, he doesn't like me, this insecurity, into I hate him, he has someone else, etc., etc. We interpret and we create through our concepts. But for even a single moment, do we stop and think, maybe my partner is going through a difficult time. Maybe he's had a hard day at work. Maybe he's feeling a sickness that he's hiding from me and he's not feeling well. You know, maybe he's just simply distracted. Maybe he's not seeing me at all. He's responding to something internal, and he's not greeting me in the way that I desire. You know, we catch a glimpse of something that we perhaps just simply don't understand. But instead, we spin out into all these kinds of thoughts of negativity, and this negativity builds and builds and builds. Really, in reality, this is what is called suffering. And this is how conceptual mind works. But is this reality or insecurity? You know, last time we spoke, somebody said, or had this kind of a part of the question was, really, we don't see reality? We create it? Of course we create it. Reality is created by our mind, based on our previous experiences, and based on really the state of our mind, how developed it is, how much awareness it has. This inability to look at another person without getting caught up in the storm of our own projections and anticipations and desires is not just how we build suffering, it's how we project reality. You know, yes, of course, we experience something through our senses, like we came in and we saw our partner look through us with glass eyes. But we don't stop there, do we? We create this entire gigantic narrative that goes from he doesn't like me to I hate him and he's cheating on me in seconds, in instants. And why does that happen? It's because we cling to self-identity. We protect that self-identity with teeth and nails. And that identity, that ego that we cling to, requires a certain price. It wants people to respond to us only in particular ways, and does not want other kinds of experiences. We demand from someone to praise us, and we will lash out at them insanely the moment they say a negative thing against us. You know, that's how we observe a mind in its role as a creator. Our experiences are never bare experiences. They are always accompanied by this flurry and avalanche of concepts. We mistake mental noise for reality, as one guy said. I forgot whose podcast it was, but I thought it was such a beautiful phrase. Mistaking mental noise for reality. And we have to, as practitioners, this is what practice is not identifying with thoughts. And knowing that thoughts don't define us unless we cling to them. We have to separate our experience and this avalanche of creation that starts to spin out. And that when we, in our ordinary mind, we mistake that for reality. We're not even aware that we're creating based on our past and our anticipation and desired effects of the future. Our thoughts are based on our past experiences and our habits. We're not seeing reality. We're seeing a karmic vision based on connections and habits, hopes and fears. Our narration that is overlaid on top of our experience arises from the kind of past experiences and mind that we currently have. So, do we have a mind that is capable of seeing something, just seeing it without identifying with all of these overlapping or overlaid conceptual patterns of hopes and fears? Or do we identify with hopes and fears and we forget that we are creating a whole narrative that then we identify with as reality? Because really our mind is not just this logical, objective seer. Our mind is never vacant of our emotions, of our hopes and fears, of our past experiences, of the cultural narratives, of the narratives that are, inherited from our childhood. There is no objective seeing. And I think, the minute we start to really examine our mind, we have to let that go. Certain thoughts become habitual narratives, selections. This is what is anxiety, and this is what is depression. Repetition of thoughts that are negative. When we take small hurts and convert them into gigantic narratives and make them into huge pains. I think it's Michael Imperioli who said that anxiety is projecting a painful future, anticipating painful results, and depression is dwelling repetitively on painful past, things we cannot change any longer, things we wish were different, etc., etc. But what does that really do? These two movements of projecting painful future and dwelling in the painful past that we wish we could have changed, we could have done differently. What these two movements do is keep us in this grind of suffering. These two movements keep us from being present in the present. And when we're not present in the present, in the now, when we're not present with our mind here and now, we get lost in our projections, in hopes and fears, and we don't know what's really, really happening. We cannot catch our mind in the state of creation, of projection, of hopes and fears, being squashed between these hopes and fears. Mind creates stories and superimposes them on experience, and this is how it operates. But we don't have to identify with each and every thought and story. We have to kind of let go of this notion of mind objectively experiencing reality. There is nothing objective if it goes past like the smell, the hearing of noise, the touching of something, if it becomes conceptual and these concepts spin us away and go into our projections, we have to let go of this whole notion of objectiveness, of reality. There's really, for us, there's no such thing, because the minute we experience something, the mind is interpreting. It's busy at interpreting. This is what practice is: watching thoughts, not clinging to them. That is the whole point. This is what mindfulness is. This is what practice is. We use these words to identify this process. Watching thoughts, not clinging to them. Thoughts are the clouds in the sky. Sky is the mind. Thoughts are the little cloud formations, mental noise, little events. The events are the clouds that form in the sky of the mind, and they dissipate into it. Now, we learn about karma, cause, and effect so that we can understand that our anticipation and remorse, how we want to change the future, how we want to project into the future, and how we want to cling and want to change the past, or cling to the past and regurgitate it all the time. That's karma, cause, and effect. It means that, our experiences are based on past habits and experiences. And we project ignorantly into the future exactly that same way. But we also project into the future because we cling to desired results. We want certain things and we don't want other things. In that movement of this remorse and projection of the future, we create suffering. We are not in touch with reality. Not at all. Not even like a tiny little fragment. Mostly the narratives of anxiety and self-doubt is what happens in our mind. This torment is continuous creation and experience of suffering. But if we can pacify the mental noise through awareness, through practice, and we can be present to the open nature of awareness, if we have the stability, if we have the practice that can hold us on this ocean of waves constantly rising and falling, if we have that stability, if we have that habituation of watching our thoughts come and go, and that's the other key to it, right? It's like we know that our experience is based on our previous experience of karma, cause, and effect, and the future experience is also being formed based on our activity right now. Another piece of it is knowing impermanence. If we know and understand impermanence, not just the outer impermanence in terms of the seasons and days, evenings and day and night, things like that, but the inner impermanence of thoughts arising and subsiding, we can have the patience, we have the mind to let the thoughts arise and cease. We practice to learn to watch our mind and to know that all mental states arise in and from our mind, and they cease in the space of our mind. Our mind, we learn through practice that our mind is creator of all our experiences. There is, this I am seeing reality thing that's just like child's play. Because, yes, of course, we're very happy to say we are these intellectual reasoners, mathematicians. We see reality just as it is. We can describe it in physics and in mathematics. But the truth is, our mind is never vacant of our clouds, of our emotions, of our anticipations, and of our hopes and fears. Really what we see, and the teachings tell us that, but then we take that teaching to look and experience it for ourselves. What we see in the mirror of our awareness is our karmic vision. What we see is always mixed together with this anticipation and past experience. What we see is just our own subjective mind. Karmic vision reflecting in the mirror of our awareness. But we can train to see. We can train to experience without overlaying our mental narratives and selections. We can train to remove filters from of our preconceptions and habits. And if we train like that, our mind can become very, very free. We can be released from creating suffering for ourselves and for others through these anticipations. We can walk in and experience our partner looking or glossing through us and not greeting us as we desire to be greeted. and not spin out into this whole narrative. He's bad, he doesn't love me, he's horrible, maybe he's, he's seeing somebody else, etc., etc. If we can create a gap between sensation and interpretation, because we are usually caught up in the interpretation and identifying with this interpretation. Not for a moment do we suspend our creative mental process, this mental noise, and stop and just to kind of like see what is. We get caught up in these mental projective processes so instantaneously. Most of the time, we really can't get out from underneath them, but that's what training really is. If we ask ourselves, how can we see clearly beyond these mental filters and projections? In Buddhism, we call this bare attention. It's experience without layers of narratives based on present and anticipating, based on past habits and experiences, and anticipating the future. Experiencing with an awareness without constant self-referencing. What's in it for me? What do I want? How do I want them to sound to me? How do I want them to speak to me? If we can train to loosen this self-referential mental noise, we can start to experience more clearly, more directly. Thich Nhat Hanh said this incredible thing, and this really should be a mantra for us. The mind can only see things as they are when it is free from concepts. But the mind, will always create. The mind will always be this place, like the ocean will always be the place of waves rising and falling. Like the sky will always be the place of where clouds arise and weather is going through it. So we don't need to stop the thoughts. It is a huge misconception that meditation is where we stop the ocean from, creating waves, or we stop the sky from having the weather in it. That's a huge misconception. All we do when we try to stop thoughts is we create a dull mind. Rather, what we do, what is practice, is what we call this bare awareness. We watch thoughts arise, and we know that they're impermanent, like the clouds, like the waves. We let them dissipate into our awareness. If a person said something bad, something that is a blame or something hurtful, don't take ownership of it and right away say, he hates me, he said this, he is, and then go into, he is bad, he is this, he is that, and forever stay with this kind of self-clinging mind. And the next time you meet that person, all you're doing is not experiencing them, you're just from your past, you're anticipating into the future, and based on this judgment that was made, at the moment maybe that person was in a difficult state of mind. Well, what if that person is always in a difficult state of mind? A person we call my difficult person, someone we cannot just move away from. We don't have to take ownership of their hurtful words. We don't have to take ownership, of their negative actions. We can observe and leave it with them, instead of like this, he said this to me, he did this to me, he's so bad to me, and this is where all the suffering starts. And this is, the suffering we create for ourselves. And understanding karma is knowing that when we take that ownership and clinging to the self, we're creating suffering for ourselves and for them, and we're creating future suffering for self and other. That's what karma means. If we have any glimpse into understanding of interdependence, we're knowing that our present mental states are creating patterns, habitual patterns that are likely to arise the next time we're going to meet that person. Forget this whole thing of objectivity. Forget this whole thing of, they're wrong, and I'm experiencing them as they truly are, because I know that they're this and this, this negativity is real. But negativity will be more real if you leave it where it is in its place of origin, rather than taking it and internalizing it, and from that moment, spinning out of control in creation of this whole crazy narrative. This is what the training is. It's not like stopping the thoughts, but watching the thoughts. Practice is like being a mirror. Last time somebody was very curious about the metaphor of the mirror. The mirror is the sky, the mind. The mirror, the beauty of the mirror, why we like that analogy so much in Buddhism, is mirror can project things that are hideous, and things that are most gorgeous. But the mirror does not judge, and the mirror does not shy away, and the mirror doesn't really care, in the sense it projects very, very independently of what arises in it. And the biggest part of why we like the mirror analogy is the mirror, like the nature of mind, does not get stained, does not change based on what is projected into it, what is reflected into it. A mirror can reflect a murder and still stay free, and be not polluted by what it reflected, because the next reflection can be a reflection of the most kind and beautiful act, a witnessing of something tremendously beautiful and kind. So staying like the mirror, unstained by what it reflects. At the same time, knowing, another very big component of the mirror reflection analogy, knowing that these reflections are impermanent, they will come and go, but the nature of the mirror stays just this limpid, able to project on its surface anything without being affected by the reflection. Please be aware that the image in the mirror meaning the nature of your mind, is not something substantial. It cannot be grabbed. What it is, what we're seeing in the mirror, is the current state of our mind. That's why we say what we see is our karmic reality. It's like where we are, what we are right in this moment. At the same time, we're not standing still. The mind is always changing. Mind is like, the ocean and like the sky. It's a process. It's continuously changing, but not its reflective nature. The mind is always aware. We experience everything in the awareness of this mirror. And the goal of all Buddhist practice is not to feel good just for the moment. I just want to remind everyone, the goal of Buddhist practice is complete liberation for self and others. Fulfilling the twofold goal is a liberation of self and all mother sentient beings. When we can start to understand the nature of our mind in this way, and we can start to liberate ourselves from the habitual weight of projections, of anticipations, and dwelling in the past, of these hurts and these desires and hurts and if we can start to free ourselves from the conceptual overlays that are continuously stealing our awareness, that are continuously spinning us out into these conceptual webs of of pain and anticipation. If we can stop being constant machines that produce suffering, karmic machines, factories of suffering. If we can learn to train our mind and bring that training into, all moment by moment of how our life unfolds, we will soften. We will experience a lot of moments of contentment, and we will go from temporary happiness to complete, happiness of Buddhahood. It will happen. It has happened endless amounts of times. Endless human beings, sentient beings, just like us, have liberated. That's why we look to our teachers, because they will be liberated in this life. They're already free from the way that the karmic mind thinks and does stuff like we do, like we are trapped in the net of all the time. This is what practice is not being caught in conceptual webs like a fish in the net all the time. Remember, we're not just the fish, we're also the fishermen. We can end this creating constant, like, being encapsulated in conceptual prisons of suffering all the time. And that's what really practice is. It's not spacing out, it's not sitting down to make our mind blank, but it's bringing awareness and watching our mind, watching thoughts come and go without this complete identification and attachment and being spun out into the sea, into like this, fish in the net deal. We do create the net. We do get caught because of our desires and our karmic habits. So being mindful, bringing it, and practice with your difficult people, please. We have those difficult people so we can engage our practice in the most, definitive way. People that we cannot walk away from are exactly the places, the locus, the space where our practice can blossom, where we can really truly see like the transformation, the change. When they're being difficult, instead of the ownership of, he did this to me, he said this to me, etc., this whole thing, leave it where that arises, and instead of the habitual thing, I'm going to fight him, I'm going to answer back with evilness, I'm going to answer back with this, and I'm going to do this, and this whole victimhood, and and the aggressor engagement, which is like the habitual mental stuff that we are usually engaged in, the fish caught in the net of our own creation. Find the space, find the gap, and learn, and to steer your mind instead of being trapped in its trap all the time. Learn to navigate your mind instead of just falling into like some kind of reactive pattern. Say, well, I'm going to answer in a completely different way, and I will answer with the mind of bodhicitta. What is bodhicitta? It's just a mind of awareness. We are aware that that person is suffering, and that's why they're spewing out all that negative stuff. They're like caught up in their own reflexive, mind of negativity, but we don't have to add fire, to fire, or fuel to fire. If they're on fire, why do we gotta like pour gasoline? That's what bodhicitta is, understanding that that person who is being so negative in front of us right now is a person who is just on fire, being consumed by their afflictions, by their suffering. We don't need to go out there and pour gasoline. We can be doctors, we can be nurses, and that's what awareness is. Bodhicitta is nothing but a state of awareness. Awareness first, that we won't react, we can have the discipline of watching our thoughts come and go. And secondly, we're watching that person on fire with a different mind and therefore a different heart. Remember, bodhicitta is mind heart. It's not like some intellectual capacity. It's a much, much bigger, broader picture of self and other, and controlling the narrative of that awareness, just as what the quote that Michael read from the Karmapa. We can and we must affect our reality in this positive way if we hope to have any kind of meaningful transformation or a good life. In many ways, the Dalai Lama says, at least be selfish, but in an aware way. Learn not to anticipate and create future suffering while dwelling in present suffering, while regurgitating the past suffering. Learn to see a person every moment in the new light of that moment. and learn to experience your own mind, not just caught up in projections and anticipations. Learn to be free of those kinds of things, of habitual patterns, of being swinging, in the two gorges, being caught in the gorge between the two rocks of hopes and fears. Hopes and fears is clinging to self, whereas, mind of awareness is understanding first impermanence, and these difficult things we hear, we experience, etc., will end. They're only, all things that arise are temporary, and these things do arise. And second of all, learn to desire your happiness, like true happiness of the bodhicitta mind, of a reality that responds and is very, very different from the one we currently experience all the time based on our, karmic vision. We can and we need to be in control of our mind. Buddha said that, the pivotal teaching of the Buddha, which all the teachings can be summarized into this, three phrases, is do no harm, do good, and tame your own mind. The taming of the mind means the other two things. When we tame our mind, we understand what it means to do harm, creating suffering for others and for ourselves, present and future. And do good is start to become liberated, start to, instead of being caught in the web, in the net of our own making, start creating patterns of, of happiness and wellness for self and other. And that's what the mind of bodhicitta really is. It's just a level of awareness that knows all these complexities and can maneuver through them.
So taming the mind, that's meditation. That's why we meditate. That's how we're able to tame the mind. You can't do it without that.
And remember, I'm sorry to interrupt. Remember, it's called bare awareness. In each moment, use it like a mantra. Ask yourself, is this bare awareness or am I spinning out like a crazy person? Bare awareness. Let experiences arise without all these overlaps of, of our habitual patterns, because that's what gets us into trouble.
So, I'm assuming a lot of you have been with us before, so we're not going to do too much of a review. We begin by sitting cross-legged on the floor. We use a cushion to get our hips above our knees or in line with our knees, depending on your comfort level. If you're new, it probably helps to have your hips a little bit or a bit above your knees. If you can't sit on the floor, you can use a chair. And just make sure you're straight in the chair. Your back is straight. Your legs should be at like a right angle, not like reclined back. And your hips aligned with your knees, maybe a little above. And your feet flat on the floor. Back is straight but not too rigid. Shoulders are straight, again, not too rigid. Hands, you can just rest, palms down on your knees. You can do this, left hand open and the right hand on top, resting in your lap. Hands open on your knees. Some people touch ring finger to thumb, whatever's comfortable. Your head is tilted at an angle that matches the angle of the bridge of your nose. So you're not up like this. Your head's slightly tilted down. Your mouth is closed, but your teeth are light, a little bit apart. And your tongue is right behind the upper teeth where the teeth meet the roof of your mouth. Breathing through your nose, unless you can't. Eyes are open. The gaze lightly resting on whatever is in front of it. So not intensely staring, not out of focus, spaced out. And the breath, is a natural breath, not a deep breath, not a shallow breath, but just a natural breath. And let's start by just bringing our awareness to where this breath is moving in and out, where the nostrils meet the upper lip. And let's just be mindful of and put our awareness where this breath is moving in and out. And let's do 3 breaths. Let's begin. And the first technique, as always, is when we become aware that a thought has arisen, it doesn't matter what the thought is. We don't follow it, we don't judge it, we don't even push it away. We just notice it, and then we say back to the breath and put our attention on this place and on the sensation of the breath moving in and out. And when we're aware that another thought has arisen, we repeat that. And those of you who've done this a while, we also use the visualization of the mind, resting the mind, resting in the mind as this limitless, infinite, clear, stainless blue sky. Settle into that limitless clarity, and the thoughts that arise are like a cloud that has arisen from the sky. Again, just become aware of the fact that you're thinking. Become aware that this cloud has arisen and watch it dissolve and settle back into that clarity, that openness, that calm. Or go back to the breath, focus your attention. Repeat, repeat, repeat as these thoughts arise and dissolve. If you need to shift your body, settle back. If you're uncomfortable, tense, just shift and settle back into the posture. Back to the breath. Great. Okay, we will take a few questions. Q&A toolbar, on the Zoom toolbar, there's a Q&A button you can ask. I am a Christian. The Bible is the foundation. What is the foundation for Buddhism? What foundation do you use to interpret these views? Well, when we talk about the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, typically is referring to the Kangyur, how do you pronounce that? Kangyur, which are the actual teachings of the Buddha. And then there's the Tengyur, which are also the commentaries. When you talk about the teachings of the Buddha, you're talking about sutras. Sutras are what, the individual teachings of the Buddha. Buddha taught for 50 years, so there's 84,000 teachings that Buddha actually gave. So there's an immense amount of teachings. And then there's the Tengyur, which are the commentaries by the great masters on the sutras. And then there's books like the books that we recommend. So, and if you are interested in these teachings, there's a list of books and teachers on the Solidago Productions website. Like the books that we recommend often are teachers that are either alive, teaching now, or maybe in the last century or so. These are, masters who have attained realization through the path that the Buddha shared, that the Buddha taught. So there's a lot of teachings, there's a lot of commentary, which is why we always really stress connecting to teachers who are from the authentic lineages of Buddhism, these teachers, many of them are teaching now and are alive, and you can make contact with their teachings, do retreats with them, either online, in person. There's lots of their teachings on YouTube recorded, and there's lots of books, and there's a list of them. There's a list of them on the Solidago Productions website.
And if I may just add, another way of looking at this is, the question, what is a foundation for Buddhism, is mind. It's mind in its conventional sense, the ordinary kind of a sense, and its ultimate nature. So the Buddha experienced enlightenment. He wasn't just a conventional teacher who said, this is good, this is bad, do like this, do like that, these are good precepts, and sort of creating an ethical system. There is, of course, an ethical system in Buddhism, because based on the understanding of karma, cause and effect, our activity is what creates the different states of present and future for us. But I do want to say that the foundation, being the mind, is that when Buddha attained enlightenment, he really came out of that state, out of the forest, to teach about the mind in its two aspects, its conventional nature and its ultimate nature. And so we look to our teachers. Of course, Buddhist teachings were written down in Kangyur, and we look to our teachers to interpret these teachings, because they're not as easily understandable to us, and there's such a wealth of teaching because of so many afflictive states of mind. And so, there is, in Buddhism, there is the view, philosophy, there is the ethical system, the conduct, and psychology, of course. So, there are all of these particular parts that have to be synthesized together into one system to understand how everything works. But again, the Buddha didn't say, believe my words. The Buddha said, look into the nature of your own mind to understand my teachings, because the teachings are based on mind. And so it's very, very important, of course, hearing the teachings first and reading, but then the second portion of it is analyzing for oneself. And the most important portion is to taking these two portions, hearing and analyzing, into meditation to make direct experience. In Buddhism, we are not asked to simply believe someone's words. We are asked to take these words and make our own experience with them. Because only our own experience is going to shift the needle, isn't it? Only our own experience is going to really inform our worldview. And only our own experience is going to tell us to act in such and such a way. Using precepts works only for so far, but if we don't have like a really substantial personal experience, very difficult to act in certain ways, simply believing in the words of others. So, that's a very unique thing about Buddhism, I want to say.
I understand intellectually that our experiences of situations, interactions, etc., are derived from our minds, our own interpretations. I understand that spinning out is a product of minds. However, people do say cruel things to us with intention. Should the mind completely push aside those experiences and the feelings they invoke? We can refuse that ownership, watch our thoughts come and go, but how does that differ from detachment and not caring? That's a good question.
Well, actually, it's caring in its ultimate sense. When you go into a hospital, let's say you go into a psychiatric ward and somebody, throws a chair at you. Do you like throw a chair back at that patient who might be in the grip of, a hallucinogenic experience? Maybe they have schizophrenia. What do? Do you detach from them? Do you detach from a person who's screaming and running and like tearing their clothes off, their skin off, scratching them, or do you actually engage and you help? Or do you take this ordinary mind approach and you throw the chair back at them and you fight them? So these are many, many degrees. Detachment is, as I said, we don't practice to stop the mind and just, gaze from some little, nest we create another intellectual construct with, to look at those poor people who are caught up in all this. We're caught up in these webs until, full realization. So pretty much, all of the time until the last moment. It's a very false perspective to think that detachment happens. What we do detach from is being conditioned and sucked into our own afflictions. Yes, we do abandon our afflictions. That's practice. But when we abandon our afflictions, the result of that is that we can look at others with great and deep compassion. It is said, and it is an experience. I don't have a lot of experience, but go find a great teacher and you will see that these teachers are not sitting and teaching to us from some throne far away in the distance, rather than with their last breath, and that happens out of compassion. They teach us out of compassion. It is from their great compassion that we actually have the benefit of the sun of their mind. They're not just sitting somewhere in some intellectual fortress, thinking and deciding how stupid we are, looking at us, running around like insects, hurting each other all the time, pouring fire and gasoline on each other. No. Beings that have detached from their afflictive emotions and are no longer guided by, the basis is not afflictive mind, but rather the mind that sees. The compassion awakens in them naturally. The decrease of afflictive mind is increase of compassion. It's like when the dark decreases, the light increases. It's an automatic thing. The absence of dark is the presence of light. There's not some in-between state. That's this intellectual fortress of, of judgment on all the stupid people below. No. The increase of light is the increase of compassion, and that light decreases further and further the darkness of ordinary afflicted mind. What you are talking about is some kind of like desire to understand the mind of compassion, the mind of bodhicitta from some intellectual fortress of the ego, but they're not compatible. Dark and light are not compatible. you know. When there is light and there is understanding and knowing, the dark is decreased, the affliction is decreased, and bodhicitta is up. And so light and bodhicitta are one and the same thing. You know, bodhicitta is the light of mind. And so when we look at beings with the light of mind, like we look at the person who is going through a schizophrenic experience, we naturally have compassion, naturally, spontaneously present compassion. We are not just going to look at it with this, you know, oh, this afflicted, this sick person, you know, I want to be away from them and I want to sit in my fortress of solitude where it's pleasant and warm. No, that's not, you know, that's not what the light of mind is. And that's not what the light of mind does. You know, it is the presence of light in the mind, in other words, of awareness, is that immediately compassion, you know, it's like the sun, the light of the sun. It is bright and warm at the same time and shines on beings without distinguishing whether they're good or bad, you know, which is what afflictive mind does. The fortress of solitude is nothing but this construct of judgment. These are good, these are bad, these are dumb, these are this, you know, etc., etc. It's nothing but another continuation of this mind of ignorance, you know, mind of luminosity, mind, you know, of wisdom is a natural presence of compassion. You know, the light and compassion is the same thing. The warmth and light of the sun is one and inseparable element, right? I mean, we would not have life on this planet without the light and the warmth. And you know, we can only intellectually distinguish them as two things, but they're not two things, they're one thing. And that's what bodhicitta is. It's the light and the warmth. You know, when there is light, there is warmth. And also, by implication, there's an absence of this darkness of selfishness and affliction. So, you know, try not to think of it in another kind of in this intellectual web, you know, spun out, you know, into this, I understand through my conceptual mind. No, concepts really only create these kinds of, you know, artificial separations and really don't hit the point. They certainly, you know, intellectual understanding really never really changes who we are, does not really change our state of awareness. You know, that's why we meditate, to really make an experience so that our state of awareness can truly alter itself. So we can experience a person who is saying difficult things to us as a person who is under control of afflictions. Same like a person who is under control of a disease. You know, there is really no difference. Afflictions are a disease of the mind. So we're not looking down on them. We're looking and seeing this is a person without a judgment. We're just saying this is a person, you know, who's under the guidance or under the direct power of afflictive emotions, which is the same as like saying under the influence of a sick mind. And it's not a judgment.
Okay. Can I still be Catholic and practice Buddhism? You can certainly practice meditation, you know. That's the most obvious, you know, working on awareness, cultivating awareness, mindfulness. You know, I think it's good for if you investigate, you know, look at some of the books that we recommend, and see how much of that you could incorporate into your own Catholic practice or beliefs. Obviously, there's going to be fundamental differences, you know, in some ways, you know, in terms of certain views, you know, like God, you know, in Buddhism, there's not a creator God, you know, it's not a theistic religion in the same way Catholicism is. But, you know, I'm sure there's ways of taking what works for you from teachings if they inspire you and still be, you know, a Catholic. It's not really possible to be a Buddhist and a Catholic, right? Because again, there's fundamental views that are different, that you really have to, um, I think, if you're a Buddhist, things about rebirth and continuity of consciousness and things like that, and karma there might be deep conflicts. I'm not really sure. I don't know that much about Catholicism, but if you're inspired, investigate and see what works and what you can take. Again, what I said, definitely meditation is something that's not. This class began as a secular meditation class, meaning we weren't teaching anything, or we weren't talking about anything related to Buddha Dharma. And it really was at the interest of you, of people, attending this class who knew that we were involved in Buddhism, knew that we were Buddhists, that had questions, particularly in the beginning about karma. And we asked our teacher, because we approached our teacher before we even began this and said, should we, because there was a demand for it, should we teach meditation? He thought it was a good idea. And then we said, a lot of people are asking questions about Buddhism. And he said, you can talk about it, but keep the focus on the mind. And he said, because Buddha is not the name of a man, Buddha is the name of mind. So, if you're talking about working with your mind, I don't see how that can be at odds, with Catholicism.
Yeah, and we hold on very rigidly to our identities. I'm a Buddhist, I am a Catholic, I'm a this, I'm a that. Just being a little more open with this need to identify in such a kind of a concrete sense, because we are working with the mind. We are working on being better, on bringing, better outcomes for ourselves and for others, cultivating bodhicitta. And we can certainly cultivate bodhicitta, mind of awakening, mind of compassion, mind of enlightenment, no matter how we identify. But, I just want to say, we don't need to hold to identification so desperately, we hold as long as it suits us, but we understand that those are kind of provisional truths, they're just kinds of like inherited things, preferential things, cultural things, family things, hold them, but, hold it with this awareness that the nature of the mind transcends and exceeds all these kinds of things. We are not this and we're not that. We're much, much more than all of these things that our conceptual mind can, regurgitate. So, the thing is about, practicing and cultivating mind and compassion.
There's an interesting document. Someone's asking about the documentary. Um, I don't know the one that focuses on the 16th Karmapa so much, but there's a really interesting documentary called Living Buddha, Searching for the 17th Karmapa that's really worth watching, about the process of finding the rebirth of this very high Lama. Um, Someone's asking about using. I know drug use is discouraged in Buddhism. Well, that's not necessarily true, because I don't think Buddha really talked about drugs, right? Not to be flip or anything. It's not, there's no like thou shalt not use drugs. It's not a thing. They're talking about using cannabis, found cannabis to help meditation practice. I've never ever heard a Buddhist master or teacher recommend cannabis for meditation. And I'm a little bit suspicious as to how it's helping. Because, smoking cannabis is getting high. So it seems like either you're going to get high or you're going to meditate. To do those things together doesn't seem to, what you're trying to really investigate is the nature of your mind, not the nature of your, of a drug. When you say help, I'm not sure if it's helping or kind of just continuing a crutch, or habitual pattern. So I've yet to hear any master of, meditation master recommend that?
Final goal of all Buddhist practice is liberation. It's, not cultivating more addictive behaviors. So clarity is number one priority. There's no cultivating anything without clarity, right? We're not sitting down to practice to have pleasure, to space out, to just disconnect, to look at others in some kind of a way or chase a certain kind of a thing. This is what we actually address in the practice. Where are my addictions? What do I rely on so much? What do I need so much? The praise and blame, the pursuit of pleasure, etc., etc. Where are my fears? What kinds of things I'm running from and running to. We want to liberate all those mental states to be able even just to see a little bit about our own mind. Until we can shed all those kinds of crutches, physical, mental, psychological, cultural, etc. Like that quote I read from Thich Nhat Hanh, the mind with concepts cannot see anything, will not know reality, because it's mind looking at mind, it's not body under certain physiological changes, that's, experiencing itself, in some kind of a pleasure state. In fact, as a result of meditation, we often will have very pleasant states, but it's always taught to be very, very careful and not to attach to those pleasant states, because the next time we'll sit down to meditate, all we'll want is to catch that state again, is to ride that wave again. And that's not meditation, it's just another addictive behavior. So,
How would each of you personally apply the teachings you spoke about this time to structures like class and status? Has Buddhism affected your perspective or approach to these structures? I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure what
well,
the question is.
I always feel like an incredibly imperfect vessel. We really are just a meditation group. When we read quotes or prepare little things, are always based on teachings from, teachers that have a lineage and not just some kind of like newspaper articles and things like that. We always try to go to the sources that inspire, those luminous beings that are here in this world.
That have realized these teachings and applied them.
I really wouldn't say that we teach anything at all, except maybe meditation. And that what, teaching that meditation is really just going over the things we were given and trying to stay with them very, very carefully without diluting them or changing them. But always, again, with the preface of being very imperfect vessels. We are not teachers, just to be completely correct. We're just sitting down to meditate with others and maybe share a few words. I know that it's not a 100% back and forth dialogue with people. It's not a conference. People choose to come into this, into the Zoom to sit in the class together with us or maybe hear, some thoughts and quotes. But it's, the classes are designed as a meditation group to sit together and, recommendation of books and teachers. I wouldn't really call it, I wouldn't say that it is anything beyond that.
Right, but she's asking about how do you apply the teachings to structures like class and status?
Status, I don't know.
Social structures, like how do I mean, I guess you're asking like, has our opinion of social structures like class and status changed, through studying Buddhism? Maybe just thinking of, the world, right? The suffering of the world, the injustices of the world, all those, the politics and things like that are, results of karma, our collective karma being born into this country and this time and this day and age. are a result of our karma, and you know the karma of other individuals involved in these structures and how we interact with them, the ones that we directly engaged with or not directly engaged with, we are just by being alive on this earth at this time are engaged with because of interdependence. Um, but I'm not really sure beyond that what, you know, it's not like there's like a call to action, I mean, if you have a personal desire to kind of, you want to protest something or try to change this system or that, and that's your own inspiration, that's a different story. That's what you should do if you're passionate about something or inspired by something. Um, do you want to add to that?
Just please do it consciously. Make sure that the basis for action is not anger or an afflictive emotion. We can never really truly act out of that source. On the other hand, if we act to counter injustice from clarity, we can actually effectuate some kind of a change. And this is, if anything, this class is really to illuminate a little bit that the different sources, the causes for our actions lead to specific results. If we want positive results, they can never be based on negative states of mind. There's no, what is that called? Justified anger or something like this?
Righteous anger.
Yeah, anger is anger. And wanting to help or do something beneficial is wanting to be beneficial. Just to be very, very clear about that. And so, a lot of the, I would say like all of this meeting, a meditation meeting group is based on becoming aware exactly of that. Causes and results. Positive causes bring about positive results. Negative causes will always end. Always. There's no reason to hope. There's no reason to fear. Negative things will engender negative results. Positive results will engender those kinds of things. Causes and effects, this is what it means, interdependence, and so, for us just to be aware of that is, if we can bring a little bit of that awareness through this class, I think that's, yeah.
Someone's asking, how can someone meditate with ADHD? Apparently, I mean, I don't suffer from that, but I've heard people getting immense benefits from not only meditation, but, teachings of Buddhism. It can be a really helpful tool for people who have some form of ADHD, whether severe or not too severe, or even just people who don't have it but have very, very busy minds. There's nobody that can't meditate. If you have a mind, you can meditate. Actually, I've heard some people with ADHD that it's very easy to meditate as opposed to do other things, which I found really interesting. I think that's all the time we have today. Yeah.
Think of the mind, think of meditation as mind looking at mind, and no matter what's happening inside intrinsically, just have the patience and the awareness of looking at your mind. Be okay that your mind may be restless or like this or like that. Just don't identify with it. Say restlessness is arising. Impatience is arising. There's a lot of energy that's arising. Just don't identify and solidify. Watch the mind and create that, create a little bit of a gap without being pulled in and caught up. That's what meditation is. It's not as complicated as we think that it is. It's mind observing mind. And like Michael said, anyone with a mind can do it. The benefits are enormous.
Okay, we were gonna dedicate merit from today's session for the benefit of all beings by saying the following. By this merit may
may
all beings attain the state of enlightenment and conquer the enemies of faults and delusions. May they be liberated from this ocean of samsara and its pounding waves of birth,
old age,
sickness, and death.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, everyone. Happy New Year. Happy holidays.